The rain on Vraxis 4 did not cleanse. It corroded. It fell in heavy, oily sheets that smelled of sulfur and spent plasma, slicking the ruins of a civilization that had died 3 centuries ago to make room for the profitable wars of today. This was a proxy moon, a graveyard where the galactic superpowers settled their disputes with mercenaries and machines so that the lawns of their home worlds remained green and pristine. Kaylira crouched atop a crumbling gargoyle that jutted from the skeletal remains of a cathedral. Her armor, a matte black composite weave scarred by 100 different calibers, blended perfectly into the shadows. She was a silhouette, a void in the visual spectrum, motionless against the storm. Only the faint rhythmic hum of her internal life support systems gave her away, and even that was dampened by the roar of the downpour. She adjusted the magnification on her visor. 200 yards below, in the mud-choked street, a figure moved. He was human. That much was obvious by his gait, heavy, purposeful, unaccustomed to the 0.8 gravity of the moon. He wore standard-issue scavenger gear, a ragged poncho draped over kinetic plating. But he moved like a ghost. He checked corners. He watched the sightlines. He was not a scavenger. Tai Win. The name flashed in amber text on Kaylira's heads-up display, accompanied by a bounty listing that would have bought a small moon in the outer rim. Wanted for espionage, data theft, and high treason against the Trade Federation. Kaylira tightened her grip on her mag rifle. It was a simple job: intercept, incapacitate, extract. She had done it 1,000 times. She was the best hunter in the sector because she did not ask questions, and she did not make mistakes. She exhaled slowly, her breath fogging the inside of her helmet for a fraction of a second before the recyclers scrubbed it away. She leaped. She descended 2 stories in silence, her gravity boots flaring with blue ionization just before impact to cushion the landing. She hit the pavement 10 feet behind him. Tai Win spun around before she had even fully straightened up. His reflexes were impressive. He had a pulse pistol drawn and leveled at her chest in the span of a heartbeat. "You are fast, human," Kaylira thought, her voice modulator projecting a deep, synthesized growl that masked her gender and species. "But you are not fast enough. Drop the weapon," she commanded. The sound was metallic, scraping against the thunder rolling overhead. Tai did not drop it. He narrowed his eyes, rain dripping from the brim of his hood. He looked tired. That was the first thing she noticed. Beneath the grit and the 5-day stubble, his eyes were weary, carrying the weight of a man who had been running for a very long time. "I cannot do that," Tai shouted over the wind. "I have somewhere to be." "You have a cell waiting for you in the Citadel," Kaylira replied. She took a step forward, her armor servo motors whining menacingly. Tai shifted his stance, his boots sliding slightly in the mud. He looked past her, toward the alleyway she had just blocked. "Look, buddy, I do not know who paid you, but I can double it. Just let me walk away." Kaylira raised her rifle. "I am not a mercenary you can bribe." She prepared to fire a stun bolt, a localized shockwave that would scramble his nervous system for an hour. It was clean. It was efficient. Then, the rubble to her left shifted. A child, no older than 6 cycles, scrambled out from a hole in the wall. The creature was a local scavenger species, small and furred, clutching a piece of scrap metal like a treasure. The child froze, eyes wide, caught directly in the crossfire between the armored giant and the human operative. At the same moment, a stray mortar shell from the distant front line whistled overhead. It fell short, slamming into the building directly above them. The structure groaned. Tons of ferro concrete detached from the facade, plummeting straight toward the child, Kaylira calculated the trajectory instantly. She was safe. The human was safe. The child was dead. The mission parameters were clear. Capture the target. Collateral damage was irrelevant. But she did not fire. In the split second before the debris hit, Tai Win threw his weapon aside. He did not lunge for cover. He lunged for the child. He tackled the small creature, curling his body around it, turning his back to the falling stone. The wall collapsed with a deafening crash, burying the street in a cloud of choking dust. Kaylira stood frozen, her rifle lowered. The logic of the mercenary world dictated that she should have stunned him while he was distracted. She should have capitalized on his tactical error. Compassion was a tactical error. The dust began to settle. A pile of rubble lay where the human had been. Kaylira deactivated her rifle's safety, stepping cautiously toward the mound. Had he killed himself to save a scavenger? It was illogical. It was stupid. The stones shifted. Tai Win groaned, pushing a slab of concrete off his legs. He was battered, his poncho torn, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. But he was alive. Beneath him, the alien child squirmed, terrified but unharmed. "Go!" Tai rasped, shoving the kid toward the ruins. "Get out of here!" The child scrambled away into the darkness. Tai slumped back against the debris, coughing, clutching his ribs. He looked up at Kaylira, wiping blood from his eye. He laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "Well, are you going to shoot me or are you just enjoying the view?" Kaylira stared at him. The targeting reticle on her HUD hovered over his chest, turning green. He was helpless. "Why?" she asked, her synthesized voice cracking with genuine confusion. "Why risk the mission for a local?" Tai spat a mouthful of bloody saliva onto the pavement. "Because he is a kid, and we are not monsters." The word struck her like a physical blow. We are not monsters. She had spent 10 years convincing herself that she was exactly that. A weapon, a suit of armor, a thing that ended lives for currency. She hesitated. That hesitation cost her. Tai moved. He pulled a small spherical device from his belt, not a grenade, but a jammer. He slammed it against the magnetized joint of her knee. A high-pitched squeal erupted, overloading the servo motors in her leg. Kaylira stumbled, her armor locking up. Tai rolled to his feet, ignoring his injuries, and swung a heavy metal pipe he had pulled from the rubble. He struck her helmet hard. The impact shattered her optical sensors. Her HUD winked out, leaving her blind inside the metal shell. Kaylira ripped the helmet off, gasping as the humid, toxic air of Vraxistar 4 hit her skin. She spun around, hair whipping in the wind, her silver eyes blazing with fury. Tai stood 6 feet away, the pipe raised for another strike, but he froze. The pipe lowered slowly. His eyes widened. He took in the features she had hidden for a decade. The skin is the color of a deep, oceanic teal. The long, violet hair that defied gravity slightly, shimmering with static. The bioluminescent markings that traced the line of her jaw. "You," Tai breathed. "You are not a mercenary." Kaylira bared her teeth, sharp, elegant canines. "I am the last thing you will ever see if you do not surrender." Tai took a step back, but it was not out of fear. It was recognition. "I saw those markings in the archives. The royal crest. You are Varen. You are the princess." Kaylira stiffened. The title was a ghost she had thought buried. "I am no one," she snarled. Before Tai could respond, the sky turned white. There was no sound at first, just a blinding flash that vaporized the rain instantly. Then came the roar, a sonic boom that shook the very bedrock of the moon. High above the clouds, the blackened shapes of warships descended, breaking through the atmosphere like jagged knives. These were not the trade ships of the corporations. These were sleek, predatory destroyers. Orbital strike, Ty yelled, his voice barely audible over the rumbling earth. Kalira looked up. The clouds were burning. A lance of plasma energy struck the city center 3 miles away, sending a shockwave of fire tearing through the streets. They are leveling the grid, Kalira shouted. We have to move. Ty looked at her, then at the wall of fire rushing toward them. Truce, he yelled. Kalira looked at the human who had saved a child, then at the approaching death. Truce, she agreed. She grabbed him by the harness of his vest. Her armor, partially rebooted, hummed with power. She dragged him toward a gaping maw in the street, an entrance to the old subterranean maglev tunnels. They dived into the darkness just as the firestorm consumed the street above. The tunnels were ancient, smelling of rust and stagnant water. Emergency lights flickered in dying amber loops, casting long, dancing shadows against the curved walls. Kalira and Ty ran, their footsteps echoing in the hollow space. The shockwaves from the surface bombardment caused dust to rain down from the ceiling. Every few seconds, the ground lurched, threatening to throw them off balance. Who are they? Ty demanded, sprinting alongside her. Who is hitting us? I do not know, Kalira replied, checking the power levels on her gauntlet. Those ships did not broadcast an identification code. They are wiping the board. They are cleaning up loose ends, Ty said grimly, which means they are here for one of us. Probably me. Kalira glanced at him. Your ego is substantial, human. Perhaps they are here for the royalty you accused me of being, Ty smirked, despite the danger. So you admit it? Princess Kalira, the one who died in the siege of Altair. I died, Kalira said coldly. Who you see is a ghost. Do not speak that name again. They reached a junction. To the left, a collapsed tunnel blocked the path. To the right, a service corridor stretched into gloom. Right, Ty said, pointing. That leads to the spaceport maintenance hangars. If there is a ship left on this rock, it will be there. They turned the corner and skidded to a halt. Blocking the corridor were 3 warbots, heavy quadrupedal machines with Gatling cannons mounted on their dorsal plating. Their optical sensors cycled from patrol yellow to combat red the moment they detected movement. Down! Kalira yelled. She shoved Ty behind a rusted pillar just as the air filled with high-velocity rounds. Concrete chips exploded around them like shrapnel. Kalira drew a kinetic blade from her thigh holster. The blade hummed, glowing with a purple energy edge. Cover me, she ordered. She. With what? Harsh language? Ty yelled, checking his empty pistol. Improvise. Kalira broke cover. She moved with a fluid grace that defied the bulk of her armor. She wall-ran along the side of the tunnel, dodging the tracking fire of the first bot. She landed on its back, driving the kinetic blade through its central processor. The machine shrieked and collapsed in a shower of sparks. The other 2 bots swiveled to track her. Ty leaned out from behind the pillar and hurled a piece of scrap metal at the sensors of the second bot. It clanged loudly, confusing the machine's targeting logic for a split second. It was enough. Kalira rolled under the bot's chassis and severed its hydraulic lines. It slumped forward, lifeless. The third bot, however, was quicker. As Kalira rose, it swung a massive mechanical limb, catching her in the chest. The impact threw her backward. She slammed into the tunnel wall with a sickening crunch. The armor held her ribs together, but the structural integrity warning screamed in her ears. The bot advanced, charging its main cannon. Ty didn't think. He sprinted from cover, slid across the slick floor, and jammed the metal pipe directly into the bot's ammunition feed. The gun jammed. The bot lurched, trying to clear the obstruction. Kalira recovered. She lunged forward, driving her blade through the bot's optical array. The machine died, crashing to the floor with a metallic thud. Silence returned to the tunnel, broken only by the heavy breathing of the two combatants. Kalira leaned against the wall, clutching her chest. Her armor was smoking. Sparks showered from the damaged chest plate. "Are you okay?" Ty asked, walking over, his face etched with concern. "That was a heavy hit." "I am fine." Kalira winced, trying to straighten up. "It will take more than a tin can to kill me." She took a step and stumbled. The latching mechanism on her breastplate, damaged by the blow, gave way with a sharp hiss. The heavy armor plating on her torso split open and fell away, dangling by a single wire. Beneath the armor, she wore only a thin, form-fitting mesh suit designed to interface with the machine. The suit was translucent in places, revealing the bioluminescent glow of her teal skin underneath, the soft curve of her breasts, the intricate glowing constellations of her royal markings that ran down her sternum. Kalira gasped, her hands flying up to cover herself, though the mesh hid the specifics. The intimacy of the exposure was shocking in the cold, industrial tunnel. "Don't look human!" she yelled, her voice echoing, panicked and strangely high-pitched compared to her modulator. Ty froze. He had been reaching out to steady her, but he snapped his hand back as if burned. He turned his head sharply to the side, staring intently at a rusted pipe on the wall. "I am not looking," he promised, holding his hands up in surrender. "I am looking at the wall. A very interesting wall. Lots of rust." But Kalira had seen it. In that fraction of a second before he turned, his eyes had widened. He had seen the glow. He had seen the woman beneath the soldier. And the look in his eyes had not been the leering hunger of the mercenaries she worked with. It was fascinating. It was awesome. Kalira hastily grabbed the loose breastplate and slammed it back into place, forcing the emergency magnetic seals to engage. It held, but barely. Her face, usually a cool teal, was flushed a darker shade of violet, an alien blush. "You can turn around now," she muttered, adjusting her pauldrons, regaining her composure with visible effort. Ty turned back slowly, keeping his eyes strictly on her face. He offered a small, crooked smirk. "Just for the record, the glowing? It is hard to miss." Kalira glared at him, but there was no heat in it. "If you speak of it, I will cut your tongue." "Noted," Ty said, but seriously, "Are you hurt?" "Just my pride," she said, pushing past him. "Let us move. The bombardment is getting closer." They ran for another 10 minutes until the tunnel opened up into a vast underground hangar. Most of the bays were empty, but in the far corner a decommissioned dropship sat on dusty landing struts. It was an old model, bulky and ugly, but the engine intake ports were clear. "That is our ride," Ty said. They sprinted across the hangar floor. The ceiling above them began to crack, debris raining down as the bombardment pulverized the surface directly overhead. Kalira ripped the hatch open, and they scrambled into the cockpit. Ty jumped into the pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the controls. "Do you know how to fly this relic?" Kalira asked, strapping herself into the co-pilot seat. "I can fly anything with wings," Ty said, "and some things without them. Hang on." He punched the ignition. The engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. The dropship shuddered, lifting off the deck just as a massive slab of the ceiling crashed down where they had been standing seconds before. Ty slammed the throttle forward. The ship shot out of the hangar exit, blasting into the stormy sky of Vraxis Thor 4. The G-force pressed them into their seats. Through the viewport, Kalira saw the devastation. The city was gone. The jungle was burning. The black warships in orbit were firing continuously, turning the moon into a glass marble. They broke the atmosphere, shaking violently as they passed through the cloud layer. The stars appeared, cold and indifferent. Ty maneuvered the ship through the debris field of destroyed satellites. running dark to avoid detection. Once they were clear of the gravity well, he engaged the warp drive. The stars stretched into lines of light, and the violence of Vraxis 4 vanished behind them. Silence filled the cockpit. The only sound was the hum of the reactor. Ty exhaled, a long, shaky breath. He slumped back in his seat. That was close. Kalira unbuckled her harness. She stood up, the damaged armor clicking softly. She looked at Ty, the human who had saved a child, who had fought beside her, who had seen her vulnerability and turned away out of respect. She drew her kinetic blade. Ty tensed, watching her reflection in the console glass. He didn't turn around. "You are not going to kill me, princess." Kalira placed the tip of the blade against the back of his seat, close to his neck. "Give me one reason why I should not. You know who I am. You are a spy. You are a liability." Ty turned the chair slowly to face her. The blade was inches from his throat. He looked up at her, his brown eyes calm. "Because I saved your life back there," he said softly. "And you saved mine. That means something, even in a war like this." Kalira held his gaze. The silver of her eyes swirled like liquid mercury. She thought of the child. She thought of the way he had protected her when her armor failed. She deactivated the blade. With a snap, the energy field vanished. She sheathed the hilt at her hip. "Consider your debt paid, human," she said, her voice returning to its icy, regal cadence. "But know this. If you betray me, if you sell my secret to the highest bidder, I will find you. And next time, I will not hesitate." Ty smiled, the tension leaving his shoulders. "I wouldn't dream of it. Besides, you are stuck with me. We are in deep space with a stolen ship and half the galaxy trying to kill us. Where are we going?" Kalira looked out at the swirling vortex of hyperspace. She felt the weight of her exile, the pain of her past, and the terrifying uncertainty of the future. "Away," she said. "We are going away." She sat back down, staring at the console. She could feel his eyes on her, curious and alive. For the first time in years, she was not alone, and for a terrifying moment, she realized she didn't want to be. The ship hurtled onward into the dark, carrying a princess who was trying to forget and a spy who was trying to remember. Bound together by a secret that could burn the galaxy down. The air on the jungle moon of Xylos Prime was heavy enough to drown in. It tasted of fermented nectar and rotting vegetation. A thick, humid soup that clung to the skin and refused to let go. Massive canopy trees, twisting toward the violet sky like gnarled fingers. Blocked out most of the sunlight, leaving the forest floor bathed in a perpetual bioluminescent twilight. Strange insects with translucent wings buzzed in the gloom, their chirps synchronized like a mechanical heartbeat. Kalira sat on a moss-covered log, her armor stripped down to the waist to allow the humid air to cool her overheating core. She was cleaning the components of her mag rifle with methodical precision, her teal hands moving with the grace of a surgeon. Her glowing silver eyes, however, were fixed on the human man sitting 6 feet away. Tai Win was bound by his wrists to the thick root of a star fern. The carbon fiber cord was tight, but not cruel. He looked ragged. The humidity had plastered his dark hair to his forehead, and the cut above his eye from Vraxis 4 had scabbed over in an angry red line. He watched her with a mixture of wariness and analytical curiosity, his chest rising and falling steadily despite the oppressive heat. "You are staring again," Kalira said, her voice low, stripped of the synthesized modulator she usually wore. It was a rich, melodic sound, but it carried an edge of steel. "Hard not to," Ty replied, testing the strength of his bindings for the 100th time. It is not every day I get kidnapped by a dead woman. Kalira paused, a cleaning rag hovering over the rifle's emitter coil. I am not dead. Obviously. To the galaxy, you are, Ty countered. He shifted, trying to find a comfortable spot on the route. I have been running the numbers in my head since we left Vraxis. The crest on your chest, the specific combat style, Varen heavy infantry tactics mixed with royal dueling forms, and the timeline fits. Princess Kalira Varen disappears 10 years ago during the Night of Long Knives, presumed disintegrated along with her entire bloodline. Kalira set the rifle down. The metal clinked softly against the stone. You are clever for a spy, but clever men often die young. Ty ignored the threat. It was a purge. That is what the history books say. A rival house got greedy, wiped out the competition. Standard imperial politics. It was not politics, Kalira snapped, her composure cracking for a fraction of a second. It was business. She stood up, pacing the small clearing. The movement caused the bioluminescent markings on her skin to flare brighter, responding to her spike in adrenaline. My family was not killed because of a land dispute, she said, her voice tightening. We were killed because my father, the king, planned to sign a peace treaty with the Terran coalition. He wanted to end the 50-year war. Ty went still. Peace is bad for profits. Kalira turned to face him, her eyes burning. Precisely. The war economy sustains 3 major alien empires and your own human corporations. Weapons manufacturing, mercenary contracts, reconstruction loans. Peace would have crashed the galactic market. So, a consortium of noble houses and human board members conspired to remove the obstacle. They hired assassins. They burned my home. They slaughtered my kin while they slept. She looked away, staring into the dense jungle. I survived only because my personal guard threw me into a refuse chute. I woke up in the garbage heaps of the lower city, burned and broken. I have spent 10 years crawling my way back up, hiding inside this armor, selling my violence to the very people who murdered my family. Silence settled over the camp, heavy and thick. Ty looked at her, really looked at her, seeing not the alien mercenary but the woman carrying a decade of ashes. I know, he said softly. Kalira glanced back at him. You know nothing of my life, human. I know about the conspiracy, Ty corrected. That is why I was on Vraxis 4. That is why the Trade Federation put a bounty on my head. He leaned forward as much as the cords allowed. I was an intelligence analyst. 6 months ago, my team intercepted an encrypted ledger from a derelict courier ship. It detailed the money trail. Trillions of credits funneled from the war zones back to shell companies owned by the high nobles and Earth executives. We found the names. We found the proof that the war is being artificially prolonged. Kalira walked closer to him, her expression unreadable. What happened to the data? I hid it, Ty said, but they found us before we could broadcast it. My team. They didn't make it. I am the only one left. Kalira stared at him. The realization shifted the air between them. They were not captor and captive. They were 2 survivors of the same shipwreck, stranded on the same hostile shore. She drew her knife. Ty flinched instinctively, but Kalira did not strike him. She knelt and sliced through the carbon fiber cords binding his wrists. Ty rubbed his chafed skin, looking up at her in surprise. We share an enemy. Ty win, Kalira said, sheathing the blade, and I do not have enough allies to waste one who knows the truth. Ty stood up, stretching his arms. Does this mean we are friends now, Princess? It means I will not kill you today, Kalira said, turning back to her gear. Do not push your luck. She tossed him a nutrient bar from her pack. Eat. We move at dusk. The bounty hunters tracking your ship's transponder will not be far behind. As if summoned by her words, a high-pitched whine cut through the jungle cacophony. It was the sound of repulsor engines, close and getting closer. Kalira froze. Her head snapped toward the north. Too late. Ty was already moving, stomping out the small, smokeless fire they had risked. How many? Kalira grabbed her helmet, jamming it onto her head. The HUD flickered to life, thermal sensors sweeping the canopy. 6 heat signatures, heavy infantry, approaching fast on Vector 3-9. A plasma bolt sizzled through the trees, incinerating a fern inches from Ty's head. Cover! Kalira roared. She slammed her shoulder into Ty, knocking him behind the thick trunk of a star fern just as the clearing exploded in a hail of laser fire. The air turned into a storm of superheated ozone and flying wood chips. They are flanking, Ty yelled over the noise, drawing his pistol. Kalira engaged her armor's combat protocols. She broke cover, a blur of motion. She did not run away. She ran directly at them. She vaulted over a fallen log, her mag rifle spitting blue pulses of energy. 2 armored figures emerged from the foliage, Rhodian trackers clad in heavy ceramic plating. Kalira took the first one in the chest, the force of the shot knocking him backward into a thorny bush. The second one leveled a scattergun at her. Kalira slid on the wet mud, passing under the discharge, and swept the mercenary's legs with a reinforced kick. As he fell, she drove the butt of her rifle into his helmet, shattering the faceplate. Behind her, Ty was holding his own. He lacked her armor, but he used the jungle to his advantage. He scrambled up the side of a tree hanging by one arm and fired 3 precise shots into the gap of a flanker's neck armor. The mercenary dropped. Good shot. Human! Kalira yelled, pinning another attacker against a rock. I aim to please, Ty shouted back, dropping to the ground and rolling to avoid a thermal detonator. The fight was chaotic, a brutal dance of mud and energy. Kalira found herself fighting differently. Usually she was a solitary force, watching her own back. But Ty was there. When a bounty hunter tried to blindside her with a vibroblade, Ty suppressed him with covering fire, forcing him to retreat. When Ty was pinned down by heavy repeater fire, Kalira drew the enemy's attention, acting as a tank to his striker. They moved in sync, anticipating each other's needs without speaking. It was an intoxicating rhythm, a chemistry born of adrenaline and shared competence. The final bounty hunter, a massive brute with a shoulder-mounted cannon, charged through the brush. Roaring, he swatted Ty aside like a doll, sending him crashing into a tree root. The brute raised a massive fist to crush Ty's skull. Kalira screamed, a primal, terrifying sound. She discarded her rifle and engaged her wrist blades. She leaped onto Brute's back, driving the energy blades into the power coupling on his spine. The brute convulsed, electricity arching over his armor, and collapsed face first into the mud. Silence returned to the jungle, broken only by the sizzling of overheated weapons and their own ragged breathing. Ty groaned, sitting up and checking his ribs. Remind me to ask for a raise. Kalira offered him a hand. He took it, and she pulled him to his feet with surprising strength. For a moment, they did not let go. Her grip was firm, her metal gauntlet cool against his skin. You fight well, she said, and there was genuine respect in her tone. You are not so bad yourself, Ty replied, breathless. A low, mechanical hum started overhead. Drone, Kalira hissed. Patrol class. She looked up. The canopy was thick, but gaps revealed the sky. A sleek black seeker drone was hovering above the tree line, its sensor array sweeping the ground with green laser grids. It was hunting for thermal signatures. "We are too hot," Ty whispered. "The fight spiked our body temperatures. It will see us." Kalira scanned the area. There was nowhere to hide, no cave, no deep water. The drone descended, its sensors angling toward their clearing. "Trust me?" Kalira asked. Ty looked at her. "Always." She grabbed the lapels of his jacket and shoved him back against the wide trunk of the tree. Before he could ask what she was doing, she pressed her body against his, covering him completely with her armor and her bulk. She reached up and deactivated her helmet, the faceplate retracting. Then, she grabbed the back of his neck and pulled his face down to hers. "Kiss me," she commanded, her voice a breathless whisper. "What?" "Do it. It confuses the thermal outline. 2 signatures become one amorphous blob. It looks like local fauna mating." The drone's hum grew louder. It was right above them. Ty didn't argue. He leaned in and crashed his lips against hers. It was supposed to be a tactical maneuver. It was supposed to be a deception. But the moment their skin touched, the logic evaporated. Her lips were cool, tasting of rain and adrenaline. She tasted alien, electric, a shock to his system that had nothing to do with the battle. Ty's hands found her waist, pulling her closer, eliminating the space between them. Kalira gasped into his mouth, her fingers tangling in his damp hair. The danger of the drone faded into the background, replaced by the sudden, overwhelming proximity of the woman she had been hiding for a decade. The drone hovered for 10 agonizing seconds. Its lasers swept over the entangled figures at the base of the tree, finding no distinct combat signatures, only a massive heat source that registered as biological activity. It rotated its thrusters and moved on, continuing its sweep to the south. The hum faded. They broke apart, but only by an inch. They were both breathing heavily, their foreheads resting against each other. The rain began to fall again, a gentle drizzle that hissed on Kalira's hot armor. Ty opened his eyes. "The drone is gone." "I know," Kalira whispered. Her eyes were wide, the silver irises swirling with a chaotic mix of emotions. She pulled back abruptly, stepping away from him. She turned her back, fumbling with her helmet seals. We should keep moving. We need to put distance between us and the bodies." Ty watched her, his lips still tingling. "Yeah. Moving. Good plan." They walked in silence for hours, the tension between them no longer born of mistrust, but of something far more dangerous. By the time they made camp, night had truly fallen. They found a small, dry alcove beneath a rocky overhang overlooking a valley filled with glowing purple flora. 2 moons hung in the sky, one large and pale, the other small and blood red. They built a small fire using heat stones to minimize the smoke. They sat on opposite sides of it, the flickering light casting long shadows against the rock wall. Kalira had removed her upper armor again to repair the damage from the fight. She wore only the mesh undersuit, her teal skin glowing softly in the dark. She looked ethereal, a creature of myth sitting in the dirt. Ty watched the flames. That was quick thinking back there. With the drone, Kalira did not look up from her repairs. It was a standard evasion protocol. "Standard," Ty repeated, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I must have missed that day in basic training." Kalira stopped working. She looked at her hands. Hands that had killed, hands that had destroyed, hands that had just touched him with a gentleness she didn't know she possessed. "I haven't touched anyone in years," she said quietly. The confession hung in the air, fragile as glass. Ty looked up. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have been a suit of armor for 10 years. Ty, since the exile, I do not let people close. If they get close, they see the truth. If they see the truth, they die, or I die. Physical contact is a liability. She hugged her knees to her chest, the glowing markings on her arms dimming slightly, reflecting her sadness. I forgot what it felt like, to be held, even for a lie. Ty stood up. He walked around the fire. He moved slowly, giving her every chance to tell him to stop, to draw a weapon, to put the wall back up. She didn't. He sat down next to her, close enough that he could feel the radiant heat of her alien physiology. He reached out and gently brushed a strand of violet hair away from her face, tucking it behind her pointed ear. You are not alone anymore. Kaylira, he whispered. She shuddered at his touch. She turned her face into his hand, closing her eyes. The contact sent a jolt through her that was almost painful in its intensity. You do not know what you are doing, she warned, her voice trembling. My species, we are not like you. We do not just touch our skin, we bond. If I let you in, I am not afraid, Ty said. Kaylira opened her eyes. They were luminous, searching his face for any sign of deception. She found none. She leaned in, her lips inches from his. She hesitated, the fear of a decade warring with a hunger that was consuming her. If I start, she whispered, her breath hitching, I won't stop. Ty looked deep into her silver eyes, seeing the galaxy of pain and hope she carried. He placed his hand on the back of her neck, pulling her forward. Then don't stop. Kaylira kissed him, and this time, it was not a deception. It was a surrender. She pushed him back against the stone floor of the alcove, her body covering his. As their skin connected, Ty gasped. It wasn't just physical sensation. It was a flood of static electricity that bypassed his nerves and went straight to his mind. He felt her. Not just the weight of her body, but her. Flashes of memory exploded behind his eyes. A crystal palace burning, the smell of ozone and blood, the screaming of a child who was also her, the cold, hard silence of deep space. He felt her loneliness, a vast, crushing ocean that had drowned her for years. And she felt him. She felt his grief for his dead team, his cynical exhaustion, and the bright, burning ember of his attraction to her. Kaylira pulled the mesh suit from her shoulders, revealing her bare chest. Her skin was hot, feverish. The bioluminescent markings flared brilliant white, pulsing in time with her rapid heartbeat. Ty ran his hands down her back, tracing the line of her spine. Her skin felt like silk over steel, vibrating with energy. When he touched the royal sigil on her shoulder, she cried out, not in pain, but in a release of tension so ancient it sounded like a sob. She kissed his neck, his chest, her hands moving with a desperation that bordered on violence. She needed to be real. She needed to be anchored. Ty. She gasped, his name sounding like a prayer in her native tongue. He held her, grounding her storm. He kissed the tears that leaked from her silver eyes. The psychic connection deepened, blurring the lines between where he ended and she began. He felt her pleasure as his own, a cascading wave of colors, violet and gold, crashing through his mind. He felt her fear dissolve into trust. They moved together in the flickering firelight, a human exile and an alien princess, stripping away the layers of armor and lies until there was nothing left but the raw, glowing truth of two souls finding home in the dark. For the first time in 10 years, the jungle of Xylos Prime was not a hostile battlefield. It was a sanctuary. And as Kaylira cried out in the final moments, clutching Ty as if he were the only solid thing in the universe, the twin moons above seemed to shine a little brighter, bearing witness to the spark that would eventually burn down an empire. The asteroid station known as Black Point Drift was a tumor of metal and rock clinging to the edge of the neutral zone. It was a hollowed-out mining colony that had long ago exhausted its ore and now mined a far more volatile resource: information. The air inside the station's docking ring tasted of recycled oxygen and stale alcohol, a metallic tang that sat heavy on the tongue. Neon signs in a dozen alien scripts flickered and buzzed against the grimy bulkheads, advertising everything from illegal cybernetics to memory wipes. Kaylira moved through the crowd with the fluid, predatory grace of a creature trying very hard to look harmless. She wore a heavy scavenger's cloak, the hood pulled low to obscure her face. Beneath the fabric, a localized distortion field, a piece of tech Ty had salvaged from their stolen dropship, blurred her features into a generic, forgettable smear for any facial recognition scanners. But nothing could mask the way she moved, or the tension radiating from her frame. Ty walked beside her, his hand hovering near the blaster pistol concealed in his jacket. He wore the grease-stained jumpsuit of a reactor technician, a disguise that allowed him to blend into the background of the station's industrial underbelly. They did not speak. They did not need to. The psychic bond that had forged between them on the jungle moon was still there. A low hum of shared awareness at the back of Kaylira's mind. She could feel his alertness, sharp and jagged, checking every shadow, every face in the crushing throng. It was a sensation that was both terrifying and comforting. For 10 years, her mind had been a fortress of silence. Now, there was a window open, and through it came the steady warmth of his presence. "We are close," Ty murmured, his voice barely audible over the roar of a passing maglev train. The contact said the entrance to the archive is behind the cooling vents of Sector 4. Kaylira nodded slightly. "Keep your head down. That patrol drone is scanning for biosignatures." They ducked into a narrow alleyway lined with steam pipes that hissed and rattled. The station was a labyrinth of illicit trade. Kaylira saw a crate of stolen military-grade optics being exchanged for a bag of uncut gems. She saw a human deserter selling the codes to a supply frigate. It was a microcosm of the galaxy she despised, a place where loyalty was a currency that depreciated by the hour. They reached Sector 4, a derelict industrial zone where the gravity plating was glitchy, making every step feel slightly too light. The entrance to the archive was exactly where Ty's intel said it would be. A blast door welded shut, hidden behind a massive intake fan. Ty knelt by the control panel, pulling a bypass kit from his belt. "This will take a minute. The encryption is archaic, but it is layered." Kaylira stood guard, her back to him, watching the alley. "Do not underestimate it. The broker who runs this archive preserves secrets that empires kill to keep buried." "I am hurt you think I would be sloppy," Ty said, a grin evident in his voice even though she could not see his face. The door hissed, the locking mechanism groaning in protest as it disengaged. Ty pushed the heavy steel slab open, revealing a dark, descending staircase that smelled of ozone and dry rot. "Ladies first," Ty said, gesturing with mock chivalry. Kaylira stepped into the dark, her night vision adjusting instantly. They descended into the bowels of the asteroid. The noise of the market faded, replaced by the hum of high-capacity server banks. The archive was a cavernous room carved directly into the rock. It was freezing, the temperature kept low to preserve the endless rows of data cores that lined the walls like coffins in a crypt. In the center of the room sat a single terminal, bathed in the harsh white light of a solitary lamp. Kaylira approached the terminal. She pulled a data spike from her cloak and jammed it into the port. The screen flickered to life, scrolling through thousands of directories. "Search for House Varen," she commanded, her voice tight. Search for the timeline of the purge. Ty typed furiously, his fingers dancing over the holographic interface. I am cross-referencing with the financial records from the Trade Federation. If there is a link, it will be in the transaction logs. The screen froze. A file opened. It was a video recording, grainy and stamped with the encryption seal of the High Council. Kalira felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. Play it. The video expanded. It showed a dimly lit boardroom. Kalira recognized the decor immediately, the obsidian table, the banners of the royal houses, and she recognized the man sitting at the head of the table. It was not her father. It was her cousin, Vorian. He looked younger in the footage, his face unscarred by the years of war that had followed, but his smile was the same, charming, vacuous, and cruel. Sitting across from him was a human general, a man Ty recognized with a sharp intake of breath. General Kane, the architect of the Outer Rim pacification. We have a deal then, Vorian said, his voice smooth. I facilitate the removal of the king and his immediate heirs. In exchange, your federation supplies the insurrectionists with heavy ordnance and the rights to the iridium mines on Vraxis 4. Kane added, leaning forward. Of course, Vorian waved a hand dismissively. But there is the matter of the surplus population. The war will create refugees. Kane smiled, a predator baring its teeth. We have a market for that too. Biological components are in high demand for the new cyber soldier program. We take the healthy ones. You keep the throne. The war continues. Profits rise, and order is maintained. The video ended. Kalira stood frozen. The silence in the archive was deafening. It was not just a coup. It was a harvest. Her family had not just been killed for power, they had been killed to turn her people into spare parts for human machines. Ty stepped back from the console, his face pale. Kalira, I didn't know it went that deep. They sold us, Kalira whispered, the words scraping out of her throat. My own blood, Vorian sold our people for mining rights and weapons. She slammed her fist into the console, cracking the screen. The rage that erupted within her was blinding. It was a white-hot fire that threatened to consume her entirely. She wanted to scream, to tear the station apart rivet by rivet. We have the proof, Ty said, his voice urgent. He grabbed her arm, grounding her. Kalira, look at me. We have the proof. We can expose him. We can destroy them all. Kalira looked at him, her silver eyes swirling with violence. Before she could answer, a sound echoed from the darkness near the entrance. A slow, deliberate clapping. Kalira spun around, her hand flying to the hilt of her blade. Emerging from the shadows was a figure she knew better than her own reflection. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the ceremonial armor of the Varen Royal Guard. He had a scar running down his left cheek, and his eyes were a warm, familiar gold. Tauren, Kalira's breath caught in her throat. It was impossible. Tauren had been her personal shield. She had seen the palace collapse on top of him. She had mourned him for 3,000 nights. Kay, the figure said, his voice thick with emotion. By the ancestors, you survived, Tauren. Kalira took a step forward, her guard dropping. How? I crawled out, just like you, Tauren said, walking toward her with open arms. I have been searching for you. I knew you wouldn't die easily. I knew my princess was too stubborn for the grave. Kalira felt tears prick her eyes. The rage vanished, replaced by a desperate, aching hope. He was alive, a piece of her home, a piece of her heart, had survived the fire. Tauren, she breathed, reaching out. Wait, Ty said sharply. He leveled his pistol at the approaching guard. Stay back. Ty, Kalira snapped, turning on him. Lower your weapon. That is my captain of the guard. He is moving wrong, Ty said. His eyes narrowed, the pistol not wavering. Look at his gait. He is favoring the wrong leg. You told me Torin took a shrapnel wound to the right knee during the campaigns. He is limping on the left. Torin stopped. He looked at Ty with a sneer that looked wrong on his face. The human is paranoid. Kay, the war changed us all. I am hurt. I am tired. I just want to embrace my kin. Kaylira looked back at Torin. Ty's words filtered through her shock. She looked at his leg. Ty was right, but it was Torin. She could see the sweat on his brow, the specific way his armor was dented. It was him. I don't understand, Kaylira stammered. Come here, Torin said, his voice dropping to a soothing purr. Let me look at you. Let me see what they did to you. He took another step, and then Kaylira saw it. A flicker, just for a nanosecond. The gold of his eyes rippled, shifting into a flat, dead black before returning to gold. It was a glitch in the biological matrix. He is a changeling, Ty yelled. The figure lunged. Torin's face split open, the jaw unhinging as his body contorted. The familiar armor dissolved into organic, shifting flesh. His arm elongated, the bones snapping and reshaping into a jagged, serrated bone blade 3 feet long. Kaylira stood paralyzed. The cognitive dissonance, seeing her friend turn into a monster, locked her muscles. She could not move. She could not breathe. The bone blade swung toward her neck, a killing stroke that she was too heartbroken to block. A gunshot cracked through the archive. The bullet struck the changeling in the shoulder, blowing off a chunk of gray, shifting matter. The creature shrieked, a sound like grinding metal, and stumbled back, its aim thrown off. The blade missed Kaylira's throat by an inch, slicing through the heavy fabric of her cloak and biting deep into her shoulder. Kaylira fell back, crying out in pain as blood sprayed across the floor. Ty was already moving. He fired again and again, 2 shots to the chest. The changeling roared, its form destabilizing, cycling through a dozen faces, a human woman, a Rhodian mercenary, Torin again, before it settled on a gray, faceless humanoid form. It charged Ty. Ty dropped to a slide, going under the swinging bone blade. He kicked the creature's knee, hearing a satisfying snap, but the changeling barely slowed. It backhanded him, sending him flying across the room. Ty slammed into a server rack, his pistol skittering away into the darkness. The assassin turned back to Kaylira. It loomed over her, raising the blade to finish the job. Princess, the creature hissed, its voice a distorted mockery of Torin's. The cousin sends his regards. Kaylira looked up. She saw the monster, but she still saw the ghost of the friend it had worn. Her hand trembled on her knife. She couldn't do it. She couldn't kill the face of the man who had raised her. Do it, Ty screamed from the floor, blood running down his chin. It is not him. The blade came down. Ty scrambled, grabbing a loose power cable from the severed server rack. He lunged, jamming the live wire into the base of the assassin's neck. High-voltage electricity arced through the changeling's body. It convulsed violently, the organic camouflage failing completely. It thrashed, unable to break free as the current cooked its nervous system. Kaylira snapped out of her trance. The smell of burning ozone and flesh broke the spell. She saw the creature for what it was, a weapon sent by Vorian. She drew her knife. With a scream of pure, unadulterated fury, she drove the blade up under the creature's ribs, piercing its dual hearts. The changeling stiffened, then collapsed into a pile of gray sludge. Silence returned to the archive, heavy and suffocating. Kaylira sat on the floor, clutching her bleeding shoulder. She stared at the puddle of gray matter. She was shaking, not from the cold but from the shock. It hadn't been Torin. Torin was dead. He was really dead. And Vorian had used his memory as a puppet to try and gut her. Ty limped over to her. He didn't say a word. He knelt down, checking the wound on her shoulder. It was deep, the bone blade having severed muscle and nicked the artery. "We have to go," Ty said gently. "Security will be here in 2 minutes." Kalira nodded, but she didn't move. She looked at Ty, her eyes wide and hollow. I hesitated. "We will talk about it later," Ty said. He hauled her up, wrapping his arm around her waist to support her weight. "Right now, we run." They made it back to the dropship just as the station's alarms began to wail. Ty punched in the launch sequence, and they blasted out of the docking ring, disappearing into the asteroid field before the patrol ships could lock on. Back in the safety of hyperspace, the silence on the ship was absolute. Kalira sat on the edge of the biobed in the small, sterile medbay. She had stripped off her cloak and the upper half of her undersuit, leaving her torso bare. The wound on her shoulder was ugly, a jagged tear in her teal skin that oozed violet blood. Ty moved around the room gathering supplies, dermal regenerators, antiseptic foam, bandages. He worked with quiet efficiency, washing his hands before approaching her. He stood between her legs, inspecting the wound. "This is going to sting," he said softly. He applied the antiseptic. Kalira hissed, her hands gripping the edge of the bed until the metal groaned. She did not cry out. She stared at the wall, her jaw locked tight. "I almost died," she said, her voice flat. Ty focused on cleaning the cut. "You didn't." "Because of you," Kalira said. "I froze. I saw him. And I froze. I am a warrior. I am a mercenary. And I stood there like a child and let him cut me." She looked at Ty, her eyes filling with angry tears. "I am weak." Ty stopped. He set the medical tool down. He placed his hands on her knees, forcing her to look at him. "You are not weak," he said firmly. "You are grieving. There is a difference." Kalira shook her head. "In my world, they are the same. Feelings are a liability. I proved that today. If you hadn't been there. But I was there." Ty interrupted. "That is the point. You do not have to do this alone anymore. You do not have to be the perfect soldier every second of every day." He picked up the dermal regenerator. He began to seal the wound, the laser stitching the alien flesh back together. "You don't have to be strong with me, Kalira," he whispered. The words shattered the last of her defenses. Kalira let out a shuddering breath, and her head dropped forward, resting against Ty's chest. She sobbed, a harsh, racking sound that had been suppressed for 10 years. She cried for Torin, for her parents, for the girl she had been before the fire. Ty held her. He didn't shush her. He didn't tell her it would be okay. He just held her, his hand stroking the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her long violet hair. He stood there as her anchor while the storm passed. Eventually, the sobbing subsided. Kalira pulled back, wiping her face. She looked exhausted, but the frantic edge was gone from her eyes. Ty finished dressing the wound. He reached for a clean bandage, but Kalira caught his hand. Her skin was hot. The fever from the combat stims and the emotion was radiating off her. She looked at his hand, then up at his face. The dynamic in the room shifted instantly. The grief evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sharp intensity. She didn't want to be comforted anymore. She wanted to feel something else. She wanted to obliterate the memory of the gray sludge with something living, something real. Kalira guided his hand from her hand to her neck, and then down to her collarbone. She pressed his palm against her skin, right over her beating heart. "Ty," she said, The name was a command, not a question. Ty went still. Kaylira? She stood up. The movement brought her face level with his. She was taller than him by an inch. And right now, she felt looming, powerful. She reached out and grabbed the front of his shirt, pulling him in. "Make me forget," she whispered against his lips. She kissed him. It wasn't like the kiss in the jungle, sweet and tentative. This was hungry. It was a collision. She bit his lip, tasting the copper of his blood, and pushed him backward until his legs hit the edge of the bio-bed. Ty grasped her waist, trying to be gentle, mindful of her injury, uncareful. "Your shoulder." "I don't care about the shoulder," Kaylira growled. She shoved him down onto the bed. She straddled his lap, her thighs gripping his hips with bruising force. She loomed over him, her violet hair falling like a curtain around their faces. Her chest was bare, the bandages stark white against her teal skin, the bioluminescent markings pulsing with a chaotic, rapid rhythm. She reached down to the clasps of her metallic belt, the last piece of her armor that remained. With a sharp click, it fell to the floor. She sat back, exposing herself fully to him. The light in the medbay was harsh and unforgiving, hiding nothing. She didn't cover herself. She didn't shy away. She spread her arms, her silver eyes blazing with a mix of defiance and desire. "This time, you can look human," she said, a flush of violet coloring her cheeks. "Look at all of it." Ty looked. He looked at the scars that mapped her history. He looked at the alien grace of her curves. He looked at the woman who was offering him everything she had left. "You are beautiful," he breathed. Kaylira made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and descended on him. They made love with a desperation that bordered on violence. It was a reclaiming. Kaylira rode him, setting a rhythm that was punishing and deep. She needed to feel him everywhere. She needed the friction, the sweat, the physical proof that she was alive and he was alive. Ty met her intensity. He gripped her hips, his thumbs pressing into her skin, anchoring her. He watched her face as she moved above him, her head thrown back, her mouth open in a silent cry. The psychic bond flared white-hot, and he felt her pleasure spike through his own nervous system, a feedback loop of sensation that made his vision blur. She didn't speak. She didn't want words. She wanted the animal reality of it. She pinned his wrists to the bed, dominating him, taking what she needed. It was rough, messy, and entirely necessary. When the climax hit her, she cried out his name, a raw, shattered sound that echoed in the small room. She collapsed forward, her forehead resting on his chest, her body trembling as the aftershocks rolled through her. Ty wrapped his arms around her, pulling the blanket up to cover them both. They lay there in the tangle of limbs and sweat, the only sound the humming of the ship's engines. A long time passed. Kaylira shifted, resting her chin on his chest. She traced the line of his jaw with one finger. Her eyes were clear now, the mercury calm again. "I have a secret," she whispered. Ty stroked her hair, his eyes closed. "I thought we were done with secrets." "Not this one," she said. She pushed herself up on one elbow, even tangled in bedsheets, with her hair a mess. She looked regal. "I lied to you," she said. "I told you I was an exile. I told you I was running away, aren't you?" Ty asked, opening his eyes. Kaylira looked at the ceiling, at the metal plates of the ship. "Technically, it's by the old laws of the Varen. I am not just a survivor. Since my father and brothers are dead, I am the queen." Ty stared at her. "The queen?" Kaylira nodded. "The throne doesn't exist. The palace is ash. My people are scattered or sold. But the title, it is in the blood. It is in the biocode." She looked down at him, and her expression hardened. There was a steel in her gaze that Ty had not seen before. It wasn't the coldness of the mercenary. It was the resolve of a ruler. When I saw Vorian on that screen, when I saw what he did, I realized something. I don't just want to kill him. Ty, I don't just want revenge. Wait, what do you want? Ty asked softly. Kalira's hand drifted down to her stomach, as if protecting something deep inside. I want it back, she said. I want my throne. I want to tear Vorian down and sit on the seat of my ancestors. I want to rule. She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. And that terrifies me, because I don't know if I want it for justice or for power. Ty reached up and cupped her cheek. It doesn't matter why you want it right now. What matters is what you do when you get it. Kalira leaned into his touch. And will you be there, when I am a queen and not a mercenary? Will you still stand by me then? Ty smiled, a tired, honest smile. Princess, I will stand by you until the stars burn out. Kalira kissed him softly, sealing the vow. Then we have work to do, because taking back a kingdom is going to be much harder than stealing a spaceship. She lay back down, curling into his side. For the first time in a decade, the nightmares of the fire did not come. Instead, she dreamed of a throne room and the man standing beside her, holding her hand as the galaxy bowed. The planet of Hydros Prime was a weeping sore in the galaxy. It was a world composed entirely of dying oceans, where the sea level had risen 300 feet in the last century, drowning the archipelagos and the cities built upon them. The rain here never stopped. It fell in gray, relentless curtains, hammering against the hulls of the rusted floating platforms that served as the last refuge for the population. Kalira piloted the stolen dropship through the atmospheric turbulence. The ship shook violently as they descended through the storm clouds, the wind howling against the heat shields. Below them, the ocean churned, a chaotic landscape of black waves topped with toxic white foam. There, Kalira said, pointing to a grid of lights blinking faintly in the gloom. Deep Sea Rig 9. It looks like a coffin floating in a sewer, Tywin remarked, gripping the co-pilot's console as the ship lurched. It is the only place left where loyalty still has currency. Kalira replied. She brought the ship down on the landing pad, the magnetic clamps engaging with a heavy metallic thud. The rain instantly drummed against the cockpit glass, obscuring the view. They grabbed their gear, the airlock hissing open to admit the smell of brine, rust, and decaying kelp. Waiting for them in the hangar bay was a figure carved from granite and regret. General Threx stood 7 feet tall, his amphibious skin the color of dried slate. He wore a ragged military coat adorned with medals from a kingdom that no longer existed. One of his eyes was natural, a piercing yellow slit. The other was a red cybernetic implant that whirred as it focused on them. General, Kalira said, stepping onto the wet deck. She did not bow. She stood tall, the way he had taught her. Threx did not smile. He walked forward, his heavy boots clanging on the metal. He stopped a foot away from her, looking her up and down, noting the scars on her armor and the way she held herself. You look like hell, princess. Threx grunted. His voice sounded like grinding stones. I have had a long decade, Threx, she replied softly. Threx turned his gaze to Ty. And this is the human pet I heard about? The spy who convinced a Varen royal to turn traitor. I am not a pet, Ty said, stepping forward, his hand resting near his holster. And she is not a traitor. She is the only honest thing left in this war. Threx laughed, a sharp, barking sound. He has teeth. Good. You will need them. Come inside before the rain melts your skin. They followed the general into the rig. The interior was a labyrinth of dripping pipes and flickering halogen lights. It was a military base repurposed as a hermitage. Threx led them to a central command room where a holographic map of the sector hovered above a circular table. The map was awash in red warning icons. "You are popular," Threx said, tapping a console. "Look at this." A projection of a bounty listing materialized. It showed Kaylira's face, a composite image from the security footage at the asteroid station. The sum beneath it was staggering. 50 million credits, dead or alive. "Your cousin Vorian has been busy," Threx explained, lighting a foul-smelling cigar. "He has declared you a terrorist. The official story is that you are a rogue biological weapon, a failed experiment that massacred the archive staff. He has mobilized the Royal Armada. 3 battle groups are sweeping the sector. They are not looking for a prisoner. They are looking for a corpse." Kaylira stared at her own face on the projection. The lie was efficient. Vorian knew that if the galaxy thought she was a monster, no one would listen to what she had to say. "We have the data," Ty said, stepping up to the table. "We have proof that Vorian and the noble houses engineered the war. We have the recordings of him selling his own people for mining rights." "So use it," Threx said, exhaling a plume of blue smoke. "That is what I said," Ty argued, looking at Kaylira. "We uploaded it to Stellar Net. We broadcast it on every frequency. We break their narrative." "No," Kaylira said sharply. Her voice cut through the room. Ty turned to her, frustration evident in his posture. "Why?" "Kaylira, we have the gun in our hand. Pull the trigger. If we release that data without a plan," Kaylira said, her eyes flashing silver, "we do not just hurt Vorian. We destabilize the entire sector. The revelations will cause riots on 1,000 worlds. The colonies will revolt against the core worlds. The mercenaries will turn on their employers. Supply lines will collapse. Millions of innocents will starve or die in the crossfire. It will be anarchy." "Anarchy is better than slavery," Ty countered. "Is it?" Kaylira asked quietly. "I have seen anarchy, Ty. I lived in the gutters of it for 10 years. It is not noble. It is just blood." They stared at each other, the impasse that had been building since the asteroid station finally hardening into a wall. Ty the idealist, willing to burn the forest to kill the parasite. Kaylira the soldier, terrified of the fire she might unleash. Threx watched them, his cybernetic eye whirring. He tapped his cigar ash onto the floor. "You are both right," the general rumbled. "And that is why you will both lose if you do not stop fighting each other." Threx walked over to a heavy blast door on the far side of the room. He keyed in a code, and the door hissed open. "Come with me," he commanded. He led them down a long, spiraling staircase that descended deep into the submerged pylons of the rig. The air grew colder, the hum of machinery louder. Finally, they emerged onto a catwalk overlooking a massive, water-filled subterranean dock. Floating in the dark water was a ship. It was not a scavenger vessel or a dropship. It was a predator. It was sleek, painted in midnight blue stealth coating, with forward-swept wings and heavy plasma cannons mounted on the fuselage. It looked fast, dangerous, and unmistakably royal. The Wraith, Threx introduced, a prototype stealth frigate. I stole it from the shipyards before the purge. I have been keeping her ready for a day I thought would never come. Kaylira looked at the ship, her breath catching. It was a masterpiece of Varan engineering. "It is yours," Threx said. "But listen to me, Kaylira." He turned to her, placing a heavy hand on her shoulder. "You want to fight Vorian like a soldier. You want to strike targets, minimize casualties, win a tactical victory, but you cannot kill an idea with a plasma rifle. Vorian has made himself the hero of this war. To beat him, you have to be something more than a killer. He looked at her with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The galaxy does not need a soldier, princess. It needs a symbol. Kalira touched the cold railing of the catwalk. A symbol, she whispered. Tai watched her. He saw the conflict in her face, the terrifying weight of the crown she had been running from. Threx gave them a quarter's assignment in the lower levels. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we load the munitions. The day after, we go to war. The quarters were located in a sea dome, a room constructed entirely of reinforced transparent steel, jutting out into the ocean depths. It was silent, save for the muffled pressure of the millions of tons of water surrounding them. Outside the glass, the ocean was a deep, crushing black, illuminated only by the spectral drift of bioluminescent jellyfish. They floated like ghosts, pulsing with soft blue and violet light, casting dancing shadows across the room. Kalira stood by the window, watching the creatures. She had removed her armor, wearing only a loose linen tunic she had found in the supplies. She looked small against the vastness of the dark ocean. Tai sat on the edge of the bed, watching her. The argument from the command room still hung in the air between them. Unresolved. You are angry with me, Kalira said, not turning around. I am not angry, Tai replied, rubbing his face with his hands. I am frustrated. We have the truth. Kalira. And you are afraid to speak it. I am afraid of what comes after, she admitted. You think the truth sets people free. I think it just gives them a reason to kill their neighbors. If we start a rebellion, we have to lead it. We have to be responsible for every life lost in our name. Tai stood up and walked over to her. He stopped beside her, looking out at the glowing jellyfish. We are already responsible, he said softly. Every day Vorian stays in power. People die. Silence is a choice too. Kalira turned to look at him. Her silver eyes reflected the blue light of the ocean. Since when did a human spy become the moral compass of a Varen queen? Since the queen saved my life and showed me that there is something worth fighting for besides money. Tai said. He reached out, taking her hand. His touch was warm, grounding. Kalira looked at their joined hands. The contrast, his pale human skin against her teal alien flesh, was stark. Yet they fit together perfectly. The anger drained out of her, replaced by a profound exhaustion. She was tired of fighting. She was tired of being the general, the princess, the mercenary. She stepped closer to him, invading his space. She backed him up until he was leaning against the wide, low ledge of the windowsill. What if we survive? She asked suddenly. Tai blinked. What? What if we win? Kalira persisted, her voice trembling slightly. What if we kill Vorian, expose the conspiracy, and stop the war? What happens to us? Tai looked at her, surprised by the vulnerability in the question. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. I have, Kalira whispered. She climbed onto the windowsill, straddling his lap, her legs wrapped around his waist, the linen tunic riding up her thighs. She was eye level with him now, the bioluminescent light framing her silhouette like a halo. In every version of the future I imagine, Kalira said, running her hands up his chest to cup his face. I am alone on a throne I hate, or I am dead. I do not know how to be anything but a weapon. Tai. That is all I have ever been. Tai placed his hands on her waist, pulling her tighter against him. You are not a weapon. I have seen you. I have seen you save a child in the rain. I have seen you weep for a friend. You are Kalyra. That is enough. Kalyra leaned her forehead against his. You make me forget I am a weapon, she breathed. The admission hung between them, fragile and absolute. The tension of the war, the argument, the looming death, it all collapsed into a singular, desperate need to be close. Kalyra kissed him. It was slow, deep, and tasted of the salty air and surrender. Ty responded instantly, his hands sliding up her back, under the tunic, his fingers tracing the ridge of her spine. The intimacy that followed was not like the frantic, rough collision in the medbay. This was slower. It was deliberate. It was spiritual. Outside, the jellyfish pulsed in a rhythmic dance, bathing their skin in shifting hues of violet and azure. Inside, the air grew heavy with the static charge of Kalyra's biology. As they moved together, Kalyra's eyes began to glow with an intense, white light. The psychic bond they had opened on the jungle moon flared wide, no longer a trickle of emotion but a river of shared consciousness. Ty gasped as he felt her mind envelop his. He felt the cold depth of the ocean, the ancient weight of her lineage, and the bright, burning center of her love for him. Yes, love. She didn't say the word, but he felt it. It was a terrified, fierce thing, sharp as a blade. Ty, she whispered, her voice echoing not just in his ears but in his head. I want to give you something they cannot take away. She sat back, breaking the kiss but not the connection. She placed her hand flat against the center of his chest, directly over his heart. Her palm began to glow. It started as a warmth, then a heat, then a searing burn. Ty gritted his teeth, his back arching, but he did not pull away. He looked down, where her hand touched him. The skin was turning translucent, revealing the glowing blue veins beneath. A complex, geometric pattern was burning itself into his flesh, a circle intersected by 3 spears. The royal sigil of House Varen. It is the mark of the consort, Kalyra said, her voice thick with the trance. In the old days, it was a death sentence. It meant your life was bound to the throne. If the queen died, the consort died. She looked into his eyes, tears streaming down her teal cheeks. I am binding you to me. Ty, I am making you a target. I am selfish. Ty reached up, covering her burning hand with his own, pressing it harder against his chest. Mark me, he rasped. Do it, Kalyra cried out, a sound of pure release. As the energy surged, the sigil seared into his skin, permanent and glowing with a faint, internal light. The pain vanished instantly, replaced by a humming resonance. Ty felt a click in his mind, like a door locking shut. He could feel her heartbeat as if it were his own. He could sense exactly where she was, how she felt, the very texture of her soul. They collapsed against each other, the ritual exhausting them both. They lay on the wide windowsill, the ocean watching them, their bodies entangled. The sigil on Ty's chest pulsed in rhythm with the markings on Kalyra's arm. They were no longer just allies, and they were a dyad, a single entity in 2 bodies. Now for an hour, there was peace. Ty held her, running his thumb over the bioluminescent freckles on her shoulder. Kalyra dozed, her breathing syncing with his. They were hidden at the bottom of the world, safe in their glass bubble. Then, the water turned red. It happened in silence at first. A series of red strobe lights began to flash in the ocean darkness outside the dome. The jellyfish scattered, darting away in panic. Ty sat up, his heart pounding. Kalyra felt his spike of adrenaline through the bond and woke instantly, her eyes snapping open. What is it? She asked, reaching for her blade which lay on the floor. Ty stared out the window. Shadows were moving in the water. Massive, sleek shapes that did not belong to the native fauna. They were darker than the ocean, sliding through the water with mechanical precision. Stealth Marines, Ty whispered, horror dawning on him. They found us. How? Kaylira scrambled off the sill, grabbing her tunic. We were cloaked. Threx's base is off the grid. Before Ty could answer, a muffled boom shook the sea dome. The reinforced glass groaned. A hairline fracture appeared in the center of the pane, spreading outward like a spider web. They are breaching, Ty yelled. He grabbed his pistol from the pile of clothes. Kaylira snatched her mag rifle. The glass shattered. It didn't break. It exploded inward under the crushing pressure of the ocean. A wall of freezing black water slammed into the room with the force of a freight train. Ty was thrown backward, the water hitting him like a physical punch. He slammed into the rear bulkhead, the air driven from his lungs. The room instantly became a vortex of swirling debris, glass shards, and freezing brine. Kaylira! He tried to scream, but the water filled his mouth. He kicked upward, fighting the torrent. The emergency bulkheads were sealing, red lights flashing through the murky water. Through the chaos, he saw them. 4 dark figures in powered aquatic armor, their visors glowing red, jetting through the broken window into the flooded room. They moved with terrifying speed, harpoon guns raised. Kaylira was fighting. She was underwater, her element, moving like a selkie. She twisted around a harpoon shot that left a trail of bubbles, driving her knife into the seal of a Marine's neck joint. But there were too many. One of the Marines fired a concussion net. It exploded outward, wrapping around Kaylira and pinning her to the wall. Electricity arced through the water, stunning her. Ty kicked off the wall, firing his pistol wildly into the water. The bullets lost velocity instantly, pinging uselessly off the Marine's armor. He swam toward her, his chest burning where the sigil glowed, a beacon in the dark. He reached for her hand. A Marine grabbed Ty by the ankle and dragged him down. The last thing he saw before the water turned black with blood was Kaylira's silver eyes, wide and terrified, staring at him through the net as the sea consumed them both. The water in the sea dome was a freezing, crushing blackness that tasted of salt and copper. Ty kicked blindly, his boots finding purchase on the slick floor, but the Marine's grip on his ankle was iron. He was being dragged down into the dark, the air in his lungs burning like acid. Above him, through the murk of swirling debris and bubbles, he saw Kaylira. She was pinned against the bulkhead by the concussion net, the electricity arcing through her armor plating in jagged blue spasms. Her silver eyes were wide, locked onto his, filled with a terrifying desperation that screamed through their psychic bond. Ty. Her voice echoed in his skull, not a sound but a raw mental impulse. Ty grit his teeth, fighting the darkness creeping into his vision. He still had his pistol. He twisted his body, fighting the resistance of the water, and aimed down at the shadow dragging him. He didn't rely on sight. He relied on the sigil burning on his chest. He felt the Marine's heartbeat, a cold, mechanical rhythm. He fired. The bullet, designed for atmospheric combat, lost velocity instantly, but the range was point blank. It struck the Marine's visor, cracking the glass. The Marine recoiled, the grip on Ty's ankle loosening. Ty kicked free. He didn't swim for the surface. He swam for Kaylira. He reached the bulkhead. The net was pulsing with lethal voltage. If he touched it, it would stop his heart. He looked at the control node anchored to the wall. He reversed his pistol, gripping the barrel, and slammed the heavy butt of the weapon into the node. It sparked and died. The net went limp, drifting away like dead kelp. Kaylira fell forward, coughing water, her bioluminescence flickering weakly. Ty grabbed her harness, hauling her toward the emergency hatch. The water level was rising fast, the pressure equalizing with the ocean outside. They had seconds before the room was fully submerged. They tumbled through the hatch into the corridor just as the sea dome collapsed completely behind them with a sound like an imploding star. Ty slammed the manual lock, sealing the blast door. They collapsed on the metal grating, gasping for air, coughing up brine. The corridor was flashing red, alarms screaming in a rhythmic, deafening cycle. "We have to move," Kaylira rasped, pushing herself up. Her movements were jagged, the stun damage still lingering in her nerves. "They are inside the rig." They sprinted through the bowels of the station. The fighting was already intense. They passed bodies, Threx's loyalists, ragtag soldiers in old uniforms, dead alongside the sleek, black-armored stealth marines of the Royal Fleet. The air smelled of ozone and burned flesh. They reached the hangar bay entrance. The blast doors were buckled, glowing orange from heat. General Threx stood in the center of the breach. He was a mountain of violence. He wielded a massive rotary cannon torn from a turret mount, firing continuously into the smoke-filled corridor ahead. His coat was shredded, his cybernetic eye cracked, and blue blood soaked his chest. But he did not fall. He was holding back an entire squad of Marines single-handedly. "Get to the ship!" Threx roared, not looking back, his voice booming over the roar of the cannon. "Threx!" Kaylira yelled, stepping forward. "Go!" Threx turned, revealing the ruin of his left side. A plasma grenade had taken his arm and part of his torso. He was standing on sheer will and adrenaline. The galaxy does not need a corpse. "Princess!" he bellowed, spinning the barrels of his cannon back toward the enemy. "It needs a queen! Fly!" A volley of plasma fire erupted from the smoke. Threx staggered, his body absorbing hits that would have vaporized a lesser being. He laughed, a wet, gurgling sound, and jammed the trigger down. For Varen. He charged into the smoke. The explosion that followed shook the foundations of the rig. Threx had detonated the cannon's power cell. A fireball consumed the corridor, sealing the breach and burying the enemy and the general under tons of molten steel. Kaylira stood frozen. Her hand reached out toward the fire. Ty grabbed her arm, the grief hitting him through their bond like a physical blow. "Kaylira, we have to go. Now." She looked at him, her face a mask of ash and tears. She nodded once, a sharp, jerky motion. They ran to the Wraith. The prototype frigate sat on the launch rail, its engines already humming. They scrambled up the ramp, Kaylira hitting the seal control before they even reached the cockpit. Ty jumped into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls, bypassing the pre-flight checks. Kaylira strapped into the gunnery station. Weapons are hot, shields to maximum. "Get us out of here." Ty slammed the throttle forward. The Wraith shot out of the underwater hangar, tearing through the ocean at supersonic speeds. The water boiled around their hull. They breached the surface in a shower of spray and steam, rocketing into the storm-choked sky of Hydros Prime. The moment they cleared the cloud layer, the proximity alarm screamed. The sky was not empty. It was a wall of steel. 3 battle groups hung in orbit. Hundreds of fighters swarmed like angry wasps. And in the center of the formation sat the Sovereign, a dreadnought 5 miles long, bristling with turbo lasers. It was a city of death, painted in the royal colors of gold and obsidian. "They are locking onto us," Kaylira said, her voice deadly calm. 500 distinct target locks. Ty looked at the sensor board. It was impossible. They were 2 people in a stolen ship against the might of an empire. "We can't fight them," Ty said. "We don't have to fight them," Kaylira replied. "We just have to survive them." Ty looked at the console. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a data chip, the one containing the raw code he had salvaged from the archive, modified with his own aggressive algorithms. "I have an idea," Ty said. "It is stupid, and it probably won't work." "Do it," Kaylira said. Ty slotted the chip into the comms array. He began to type, his fingers blurring. I am uploading the Hydra virus. I am piggybacking it on their own targeting frequency. If I can handshake with the Sovereign's central AI, I can crash their tactical grid. Do it fast. Human, Kalyra warned. Missiles inbound, space lit up. Hundreds of streaks of fire raced toward them. Ty pushed the Wraith into a corkscrew dive, the inertial dampeners whining in protest. Explosions blossomed around them, shaking the ship violently. Connection established, Ty muttered, sweat stinging his eyes. Uploading. Come on, come on. A heavy laser blast grazed their port wing. The ship lurched. Shields at 40%, Kalyra yelled. Done. Ty hit the enter key. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the chaos in the sky shifted. The formation of the enemy fighters broke. Ships began to drift, their engines cutting out. The targeting locks on the Wraith vanished from the board. On the view screen, the lights of the massive fleet flickered and dimmed as the virus ate through their command protocols, flooding their systems with junk data and feedback loops. Their comms are down, Ty breathed, staring at the screen. They are blind. They can't coordinate. Kalyra unbuckled her harness. She stood up, her eyes fixed on the massive dreadnought in the center of the paralyzed fleet. Take us in, she commanded. What? Ty spun his chair around. Dock with the Sovereign, Kalyra said. While their defenses are down. Are you insane? Ty asked. That is the flagship. There are 10,000 soldiers on that boat, and one traitor, Kalyra said. I am not running anymore. Ty, I am finishing this. Ty looked at her. He felt the resolve in her mind, a cold, immovable object. He knew he couldn't talk her out of it. He turned back to the controls, hanging the shuttle on the main hangar deck. Hold on. The Wraith wove through the drifting, confused fleet. Ty guided them into the massive hangar bay of the Sovereign, the containment fields flickering due to the virus. They slammed down on the deck, the landing gear screeching. Smoke filled the cockpit. Kalyra moved to the airlock, grabbing her mag rifle and checking the charge on her kinetic blade. Ty was right behind her, checking his pistol. Kalyra stopped at the airlock door. She turned to face him. Stay here, she said. Ty stopped. Excuse me? Keep the engines running. Keep the virus cycling. If the system reboots, we are dead. I can set it on auto, Ty argued, reaching for the door panel. I am coming with you. No, Kalyra said. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his chest, right over the sigil she had burned there. This is a blood feud. Ty. By Varen law, I must face him alone. If anyone else interferes, his claim to the throne stands valid in the eyes of the High Council. I have to kill him in single combat. I don't care about your laws, Ty shouted, fear spiking through the bond. He will kill you. He might, Kalyra said softly. But if you follow me, you destroy my legitimacy. You destroy the future we are fighting for. She leaned in and kissed him, quick, hard, and final. Don't follow me. Ty. That is a royal command. She hit the override on the door. It hissed open. She stepped out onto the hangar deck, and before Ty could follow, she shot the control panel on the inside of the airlock. The door slammed shut, sparks showering from the ruined circuitry. Kalyra! Ty screamed, pounding on the blast door. Kalyra did not look back. She turned toward the squad of stormtroopers rushing across the hangar deck. She raised her rifle, her face grim. She began the long walk to the throne. The corridors of the Sovereign were a blur of violence. Kalyra was a whirlwind. She didn't fight like a mercenary anymore. She fought like a demon. She used every trick, every dirty maneuver, every ounce of rage she had stored for 10 years. She breached the lift, riding it to the command deck. The doors opened, revealing the bridge. It was a vast cathedral-like space, dominated by a panoramic viewport that showed the paralyzed fleet drifting against the stars. In the center sat the throne, a high-backed chair of obsidian. Vorian stood there. He was waiting for her. He wore armor of polished gold, untarnished and ceremonial. His cape was velvet, his hair perfectly coiffed. He held a glass of wine in one hand and a long, elegant energy saber in the other. "Cousin," Vorian said, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics. "You are late. I expected you 10 years ago." Kalira stepped onto the bridge. Her armor was battered, her face streaked with soot and blue blood. She threw her empty rifle to the floor. "The throne is mine." "Vorian," she said, her voice echoing. "Get out of my chair." Vorian chuckled, taking a sip of wine. "So dramatic. You always were. Even as a child, you took everything so seriously. Duty, honor, the people." He threw the glass aside. It shattered on the floor. "Look at them." "Kalira," he said, gesturing to the stars. "They don't want honor. They want stability. They want to be told who to hate and who to serve. I gave them a purpose. I gave them a war. And you want to give them what? Freedom?" "I want to give them the truth," Kalira said, drawing her kinetic blade. The purple energy hummed to life. "The truth?" Vorian laughed, descending the steps of the dais. "The truth is that our family was weak. Father was going to sell our heritage for peace with the humans. I saved us. I made us gods again. You made us butchers." Kalira spat. She charged. She closed the distance in a heartbeat, swinging her blade in a lethal arc. Vorian parried effortlessly, his golden saber clashing against her purple blade with a crack of thunder. He was fast. Faster than she remembered. He moved with the fluid elegance of a dancer, deflecting her strikes with contemptuous ease. "You are sloppy," Vorian taunted, riposting with a thrust that grazed her ribs. "You have been fighting in the mud with mercenaries too long. You have forgotten the forms." Kalira gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain. She spun, lashing out with a kick, but Vorian caught her boot and threw her backward. She skidded across the polished floor, slamming into a navigation console. "Is this the best the Resistance has to offer?" Vorian sneered, walking toward her. "A broken princess and her human pet?" "Don't talk about him," Kalira snarled. She scrambled up, attacking again. This time, she abandoned the royal forms. She fought dirty. She feinted high, then swept low. She used her gauntlet to block his saber, the metal sizzling, and headbutted him in the face. Vorian stumbled back, blood trickling from his nose. His smile vanished. "Enough," he hissed. He unleashed a flurry of blows, driving her back. His technique was flawless, overwhelming her defenses. He struck her shoulder, reopening the wound from the asteroid station. He slashed her thigh. He battered her defense until her arm went numb. With a massive overhead strike, he shattered her kinetic blade. The hilt exploded in her hand, sending her flying backward. She landed hard at the foot of the throne, weaponless. Vorian loomed over her, the tip of his saber hovering inches from her throat. "You are too soft, Kalira," he said, his voice dripping with pity. "You fell in love with a human. You let your heart make you weak. That is why you will die, and I will rule forever." Kalira looked up at him, gasping for breath. She looked past the saber, into his eyes. "My heart isn't weak," she whispered. "It is the only thing that is real." Vorian sneered. "Pathetic. Still believe in love. Princess." He raised the saber for the killing stroke. The blast door to the bridge exploded. It wasn't hacked open. It was blown off its hinges with shaped charges. Through the smoke, a figure emerged. Tai Win stood there, his pistol in one hand and a submachine gun he had looted from a guard in the other. He was bleeding from a head wound, his jumpsuit torn. but his eyes were burning with a cold, terrifying focus. "Get away from her!" Ty roared. He didn't wait for a reply. He opened fire. Vorian spun around, his saber flashing as he deflected the bullets. The energy blade vaporized the rounds, but the sheer volume of fire forced him to backpedal. "Guards!" Vorian screamed. 4 elite Praetorian guards emerged from the shadows of the throne room, their pikes crackling with energy. They charged Ty. Ty didn't flinch. He dropped the empty submachine gun and drew a flashbang grenade from his belt. He pulled the pin with his teeth and bowled it toward them. The grenade detonated with a blinding white flash. The guards staggered, blinded. Ty moved in. He shot the first guard in the throat joint. He slid under the pike of the second, jamming his pistol into the armor gap at the armpit and firing. He was a whirlwind of human violence, efficient and brutal. Kaelira watched him, her heart swelling. He had disobeyed her. He had come for her. Vorian realized the guards were falling. He roared in frustration and turned his attention back to Ty. He leaped over the console, closing the distance to the human in a single bound. Ty raised his pistol, but Vorian sliced the weapon in half with a flick of his wrist. He grabbed Ty by the throat, lifting him off the ground. "So this is the pet," Vorian snarled, tightening his grip. Ty clawed at the golden gauntlet, his face turning purple. "I am going to crush his windpipe." "Kaelira," Vorian called out, not looking back at her. "And then I am going to make you watch as I burn his corpse." Ty's eyes met Kaelira's. Through the bond, she felt his agony, his fading consciousness. But she also felt his love. Kaelira looked at her shattered blade. It was useless. She looked at her armor. The power cells were drained, flashing red. She had one option left. She scrambled to her feet. She bypassed the safety protocols on her chest piece, the main reactor core for her armor. She routed every ounce of remaining power, life support, and shield energy into her right gauntlet. The gauntlet began to scream, glowing white-hot. The heat seared her skin, burning her arm, but she didn't feel it. "Vorian," Kaelira screamed. Vorian turned, still holding Ty. Kaelira didn't attack him with a weapon. She attacked him with herself. She launched herself across the gap, driving her glowing fist forward like a spear. Vorian tried to bring his saber up, but he was too slow. Kaelira's fist slammed into his chest. The overloaded energy discharged all at once. It punched through his golden armor, through his ribs, and out his back in a beam of pure, concentrated plasma. Vorian's eyes went wide. He dropped Ty. He looked down at the hole in his chest, at Kaelira's hand buried inside him. But he gasped, blood bubbling on his lips. "The laws." "I am the law," Kaelira whispered, her face inches from his. She ripped her hand free. Vorian crumpled. He fell backward, sliding down the steps of the dais, dead before he hit the floor. The silence on the bridge was absolute for a heartbeat. Then, the ship groaned. The discharge from Kaelira's armor had not just killed Vorian, it had destabilized the containment field of the throne room's localized reactor. Alarms began to scream, a different sound this time. Critical failure. Core breach imminent. Kaelira fell to her knees, clutching her burned arm. Ty crawled over to her, gasping for air, rubbing his bruised throat. "Kaelira," he rasped. He reached her, pulling her into his arms. She collapsed against him, too weak to stand. Her armor was dead weight now, a tomb of metal. Ty looked around. The bridge was locked down. Blast shutters were descending over the exits. The console lights were turning a terminal red. "We have to get back to the Wraith," Ty said, trying to lift her. Kaelira shook her head weakly. "Too late. The bulkheads are sealed. The core goes in 30 seconds. Ty looked at the blast doors. She was right. They were trapped. He slumped back against the side of the dais, pulling Kaelira onto his lap. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. "We won," he whispered, kissing the top of her head. "You did it. You won." "We won," Kaelira echoed softly. The shaking intensified. The floor began to buckle. Fire erupted from the ventilation shafts. The Sovereign was dying, and it was taking them with it. Kaelira reached up, touching Ty's face with her good hand. She traced the line of his jaw, his lips, the scar over his eye. Ty looked down at her. He didn't see fear in her silver eyes. He saw peace. "If we die," Kaelira whispered, her thumb brushing his cheek, "I want your face to be the last thing I see." Ty smiled, tears spilling from his eyes. "I am right here, Princess. I am not going anywhere." He kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, soft and lingering, ignoring the explosions tearing the ship apart around them. They held on to each other, the psychic bond flaring one last time, merging their minds into a single point of light in the encroaching dark. The world turned white. Ty expected nothingness. He expected the void. Instead, he felt a lurch, a sickening, twisting sensation of being pulled inside out. The roar of the explosion vanished instantly, replaced by the hum of a containment field. He opened his eyes. They were not on the bridge of the Sovereign. They were on a transporter pad, a rough industrial platform that smelled of ozone and cheap incense. Kaelira was still in his arms, unconscious but breathing. Ty looked up, bewildered. Surrounding them were a dozen figures. They were motley, heavily armed, wearing mismatched armor painted with the crest of House Varen but painted in red, the color of the Resistance. A large alien with 4 arms and a pirate's eye patch stepped forward, lowering a heavy blaster. He looked at Kaelira, then at the dead Vorian's blood on her gauntlet. He grinned, revealing rows of serrated teeth. "Nice timing," the pirate captain grunted. "We grabbed your signatures just as the reactor blew." "That was a hell of a fireworks show." Ty blinked, his brain struggling to catch up. Who are you?" The captain holstered his weapon and bowed, a clumsy, theatrical gesture. "Captain Rax of the Iron Vulture, at your service. We are the Free Fleet, loyalists to the Crown." He looked at the unconscious Kaelira with reverence. "We heard the Queen was back," the captain said. "We figured she might need a ride." Ty looked down at Kaelira. He pulled her closer, burying his face in her neck, feeling the steady, strong pulse of her life. He laughed, a shaky, hysterical sound that turned into a sob of relief. "Yeah," Ty whispered. "She needs a ride." Through the viewport of the pirate ship, the wreckage of the Sovereign burned like a new sun, lighting up the dark, while the Iron Vulture turned its engines toward the deep black, carrying the Queen and her consort into the unknown. The Outlaw Quadrant was a graveyard of stars, a sector of space where the nebulas hung thick and red like arterial spray, and the navigational charts were marked only with warnings. It was a place where the signals of the civilized galaxy died in the static, and where ghosts went to disappear. Kaelira and Ty Wynn had become ghosts. They drifted on a stolen freighter, a rust-bucket jump ship named the Drifter that Ty had bartered for with the pirates of the Free Fleet before they parted ways. The Iron Vulture had carried them away from the burning wreckage of the Sovereign, but Kaelira had refused to stay with the rebels. She knew that if she remained, she would become the figurehead they desperately wanted. They would put a sword in her hand and ask her to carve out a new empire on the bones of the old one. She was done with empires. Inside the cramped cockpit of the Drifter, the air smelled of recycled coffee and old conduit grease. Ty sat at the comms station, his face illuminated by the blue glow of a dozen holographic screens. He looked older. The gray at his temples had spread, and the scar above his eye was a permanent reminder of Vraxis IV. But his eyes were clear, devoid of the haunted look he had carried when they first met. Kaelira stood behind him, her hand resting on his shoulder. The touch was casual, but the connection it sparked was profound. The psychic sigil on Ty's chest, the mark of the consort, hummed with a low, steady warmth that resonated with the bioluminescent patterns on Kaelira's skin. They did not need to speak to know each other's thoughts. He felt her anxiety, a sharp, metallic taste in the back of his mind. She felt his resolve, solid as bedrock. "Is it ready?" Kaelira asked, her voice soft. Ty hesitated, his finger hovering over the encryption key. "Once I send this, there is no going back. The data from the archive, the proof of Vorian's conspiracy, the financial records of the noble houses, it will hit every news feed, every planetary relay, every data pad from the core worlds to the outer rim." He looked up at her. "It will burn everything down. Kaelira, let it burn," she said. Ty pressed the key. On the screen, a progress bar filled rapidly. Transmission complete. For a moment, the galaxy was silent. Then, the chaos began. They watched the feeds. It started as a ripple, confusion on the news anchors' faces as their teleprompters were hijacked by the raw data. Then came the shock, images of Vorian shaking hands with human warmongers. Audio recordings of the High Council ordering the liquidation of refugee colonies. Financial ledgers showing that the 50-year war was nothing more than a balance sheet for the organ trade. Within hours, the ripple became a tsunami. On Centauri Prime, millions of workers downed their tools and marched on the governor's palace. In the trade world of Volus, the stock market crashed so violently that the digital currency exchanges dissolved into code. In the shipyards of the Royal Fleet, mutinies erupted as soldiers realized they had been dying for profit, not honor. Kaelira watched a feed from her homeworld's capital. Smoke was rising from the legislative district. Statues of Vorian were being toppled, their golden heads smashing against the pavement. "You could go back," Ty said quietly, watching the same feed. "They are chanting your name. Listen to them. They are calling for the true queen." Kaelira listened. Amidst the screams and the gunfire, the chant rose, "Varen! Varen!" She looked at her hands. They were clean now, the blood of her cousin washed away. But she still felt the weight of the gauntlet she had used to kill him. She thought of the throne room on the Sovereign, the cold obsidian chair that had looked so lonely. "If I go back, I have to rule them," Kaelira said. "I have to execute the traitors. I have to suppress the riots. I have to build an army to restore order. I would become Vorian with a different face." She turned away from the screen. "Turn it off." Ty killed the feed. The cockpit plunged into shadow, lit only by the passing stars. "What do we do now?" he asked. "We disappear," Kaelira said. "We let them build their own future. I have given them the truth. That is the only gift a queen can give." 6 months later, they found the moon of Odera. It was a small, insignificant rock orbiting a gas giant in the farthest reaches of the Outlaw Quadrant. It had no strategic value, no iridium mines, and no ancient ruins. It had only vast, rolling plains of red dust that supported a hardy, purple-leafed grain called kale root, and a sky that turned a bruised shade of lavender at twilight. It was perfect. They landed the drifter in a deep canyon, covering it with camouflage netting and brush. They hiked 10 miles south to a small settlement called Dust Creek, a town of moisture farmers and refugees who asked no questions because everyone there was running from something. They bought a plot of land on the edge of the Badlands using credits Ty had skimmed from a forgotten account. They gave the magistrate fake names. He was Tice, a mechanic from the inner colonies. She was Kira, a spacer looking for quiet. The locals looked at Kaylira with curiosity. Her teal skin and violet hair were exotic here. But in the outlaw quadrant, alien species were common enough. They noticed she moved like a predator, but they said nothing. They began to build. Ty used his knowledge of engineering to construct a homestead from salvaged hull plating and local stone. It was not pretty, but it was strong. He rigged a moisture evaporator from the drifter's life support system, creating an oasis of green in the red dust. He learned to weld solar panels with a blowtorch, his hands calloused and scarred, a far cry from the delicate work of slicing data cores. Kaylira, the warrior princess who had commanded battalions, learned to farm. It was a comedy of errors at first. She broke 3 hoes in the first week because she gripped them like battle axes. She treated the kale root harvest like a tactical extraction, ripping the vegetables from the ground with terrifying efficiency. But slowly, the rhythm of the land seeped into her. She learned patience. She learned that life could not be forced, it had to be nurtured, but peace was a restless thing. The outlaw quadrant was lawless for a reason. 3 months after they settled, the slavers came. They were a gang of Zorgon raiders, riding heavy hover skiffs, descending on the neighboring farms to steal harvest and, if the mood struck them, children. Kaylira was in the field when she saw the smoke rising from the neighbor's homestead, 2 miles east. She stood up, wiping sweat from her forehead. The psychic bond flared. Ty, working in the barn, felt her shift from farmer to soldier in a heartbeat. He ran out, wiping grease from his hands. Kaylira. "They are attacking the Miller farm," Kaylira said, her voice flat. Ty grabbed her arm. "We can't. If you expose yourself, if you use your abilities, the rumors will start. Vorian's loyalists are still out there hunting for the Ghost Queen." Kaylira looked at him. Her silver eyes were hard. "They have children." Ty looked at the smoke. He sighed, knowing he had lost the argument before it began. He went back into the barn and returned with a heavy wrench and a concealed blaster pistol. "No armor," he warned, "and not glowing." Kaylira smirked. "I will be a shadow." They took the hoverbike Ty had restored. They parked a mile out and moved in on foot. The Zorgons were sloppy. They were used to terrified farmers, not elite operatives. They had rounded up the Miller family in the courtyard, laughing as they loaded sacks of grain onto their skiffs. The leader, a massive brute with a shock whip, was threatening the father. Kaylira moved through the tall purple grass. She didn't have her kinetic blade. She didn't have her power suit. She wore a linen tunic and heavy work boots. It was enough. She struck from the flank. She didn't kill them. That would draw too much attention. She dismantled them. She broke the first raider's knee with a precise kick, silencing his scream with a chop to the throat. She disarmed the second, using his own blaster rifle to club him unconscious. Ty provided overwatch from the ridge, firing single, suppressed shots that shattered the engines of the hover skiffs, grounding them. The leader spun around, cracking his whip. "Who are you?" Kaylira stepped out of the dust, her hands empty. "I am a concerned neighbor." The leader laughed and lunged. Kaylira sidestepped the whip, caught his wrist, and used his own momentum to flip him face first into the dirt. She knelt on his back, applying just enough pressure to his spine to paralyze him temporarily. "Leave," she whispered into his ear. "Tell your friends that Dust Creek is protected. The raiders, battered and terrified by the blur of teal violence, dragged their leader away and fled on foot into the Badlands." The Miller family stared at Kaylira. Mrs. Miller stepped forward, trembling. Kira. What? Who are you? Kalira dusted off her tunic. Just a farmer, she said. She walked away before they could ask about the way her eyes had seemed to shine in the twilight. That night, the adrenaline took a long time to fade. The homestead was quiet. The wind howled outside, rattling the metal shutters. Inside, a fire crackled in the stone hearth Ty had built. The room was simple, a rug woven from local fibers, a table made of crate wood, and a bed piled with furs. Kalira stood by the window, watching the twin moons rise. They reminded her of the night on the jungle moon, where this had all begun. But she was not that frightened of exile anymore. She turned to the heavy satchel she kept under the floorboards. It contained the only remnants of her past life, a data chip, a broken piece of her chest plate, and one other thing. She opened the bag. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the object out. It was a crown. It was not gold. It was made of a rare, translucent crystal from the depths of her homeworld's ocean. It was jagged, beautiful, and sharp. It weighed nothing, yet it carried the weight of 1,000 years of history. She stripped off her tunic. She stripped off the work trousers. She stood naked in the firelight, her teal skin gleaming, the scars of her battles writing a map of survival across her body. The bioluminescent markings were soft tonight, pulsing with a gentle, rhythmic blue. She placed the crown on her head. It fit perfectly. For a moment, she stood taller. She was the queen of the Varen. She was the commander of fleets. She was the last of her line. The door to the bedroom opened. Ty stood there. He had washed the grease from his hands and his hair was damp. He wore simple sleep pants. He stopped in the doorway, his breath catching in his throat. He looked at the woman standing in the firelight. He saw the crown, catching the orange glow of the flames and refracting it into a spectrum of colors. He saw the way she held her head, regal and proud, and the way her body curved, alien and perfect. Kalira turned to him. A blush, dark violet and deep, rose from her chest to her cheeks. She raised a hand to cover the glow of the royal sigil on her sternum, a reflex from a lifetime of hiding, but then she dropped it. "Don't look human," she teased, her voice thick with emotion. She was smiling. It was a smile that reached her silver eyes, crinkling the corners. Ty walked across the room. He didn't rush. He moved with the reverence of a pilgrim approaching a shrine. He stopped inches from her. He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of the crystal crown, then moving down to cup her face. "Too late," he whispered. "I have been looking at you since the moment you nearly killed me in the rain." He kissed her. It was not the desperate, hard kiss of the war. It was not the frantic need of the med bay or the spiritual intensity of the sea dome. This kiss was slow. It was a conversation. It tasted of the day's work, of the red dust, of the peace they had carved out of the rock with their bare hands. Kalira sighed into his mouth, her arms wrapping around his neck. The crown tilted slightly, but it did not fall. Ty lifted her, carrying her to the bed. He laid her down amidst the furs. The firelight danced over her skin, making the bioluminescence ripple like water. They made love slowly, exploring the map of each other's bodies as if they had all the time in the universe. Because for the first time, they did. Every touch was a reassurance. Every kiss was a vow. Kalira felt the psychic bond open wide. She felt Ty's contentment, his absolute certainty that this room, this woman, this life was exactly where he was meant to be. And Ty felt her release. He felt the moment she finally truly let go of the throne. She wasn't giving up power, she was choosing a different kind of strength. As they moved together, The crystal crown slipped from her head and fell onto the pillow beside them. Neither of them noticed. Kaelira looked up at him, her eyes glowing softly. "I love you," she whispered, the words no longer terrifying but simple. "I know," Ty replied, brushing a strand of violet hair from her forehead. "I can feel it." They fell asleep tangled together, the former queen and the retired spy, while the crystal crown lay on the pillow, a relic of a past that could no longer hurt them. 5 years later, the sun on Odera was setting, painting the sky in streaks of violently beautiful orange and purple. The heat of the day was breaking, and the kale root fields were rustling in the evening breeze, a sea of violet waves. Ty sat on the porch of the homestead. He was whittling a piece of driftwood, shaping it into a toy ship. He looked content. The lines on his face had deepened, but they were lines of laughter now, not stress. Kaelira walked up the path from the fields. She wore a loose dress, her hair tied back in a messy braid. She carried a basket of vegetables, her arms strong and sun-browned. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs, looking up at him. "Dinner is going to be late," she said. "The irrigation pump is acting up again," Ty smiled. "I will fix it in the morning. Come sit." Kaelira walked up the stairs and sat beside him on the swing bench. She leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sun dip below the horizon. "Where is Ilara?" she asked. Ty pointed with his knife toward the tall grass at the edge of the field. A child was running through the purple stalks. She was 4 years old, wild and fast. She had Ty's dark hair, messy and windblown, and Kaelira's teal skin, though it was a softer, paler shade. She was chasing a fire beetle, laughing as it buzzed just out of reach. She tripped, tumbled into the dirt, and immediately scrambled back up, undeterred. "She has your stubbornness," Ty noted. "And your lack of coordination," Kaelira countered, nudging him with her elbow. The child stopped. She turned toward the porch, sensing them watching her. She waved, a wide, toothy grin on her face. As the twilight deepened, the first stars began to blink into existence above, and as the light faded, the child's eyes began to glow. They were not silver like Kaelira's, nor brown like Ty's. They were a brilliant, swirling gold, a new color, something that had never existed before. "Look," Kaelira whispered, watching her daughter glow in the gathering dark. "She is lighting up," Ty said softly. The girl spun around in the field, her eyes leaving trails of golden light in the air, a living spark in the vast emptiness of the outlaw quadrant. Kaelira reached for Ty's hand. She felt the sigil on his chest, warm and steady. She thought of the war. She thought of the millions of lives she could have ruled. She thought of the cold, empty throne. Then she looked at the man beside her, and the child playing in the dirt, a child who would never know the sound of an orbital bombardment, who would never have to wear a mask to survive. The galaxy was healing. It was messy, and it was slow, and it was happening far away. But here, on this quiet moon, the future had already arrived. "Don't look. Human," Kaelira whispered, squeezing his hand, repeating the words that had started it all. Ty looked at her, then at their daughter, and finally at the stars above. "I am looking," he said, "and it is beautiful." The camera pulled back, rising higher and higher, until the glowing golden eyes of the child were just one more star in a sky full of them, shining on a universe that was finally, truly free.